in a discussion with Our Revolution board member, Keith Ellison, and an incredible panel of environmental leaders. So we were really talking about our progress in the fight to end fossil fuel subsidies through Bernie's budget bill. I know it's hard to believe. How is it possible that we still have fossil fuel subsidies, our own tax dollars going to the fossil fuel industry? It is time for that to end, and we are working on that through Bernie's budget bill. Khanna will preview his hearing this Thursday, where he has summoned fossil fuel executives to testify before Congress about their decades-long disinformation campaign about climate change. Climate action has been put off for far too long because of the lies that big oil tells. So I want to thank all of you for being here and really helping us dispel the disinformation so that we can deliver for the planet. For those of you joining on the phones, and if you're watching live on social media, please do transfer into the Zoom room. It's going to be much more fun and interactive. You can go to ourrev.us/Zoom. And if you're in the Zoom room, please let us know your name. Let us know where you're from. We'd love to kind of know who's here. So we have a ton of people coming in from Florida, Pennsylvania, from Illinois, from Oregon and New Jersey. We have Iris Hart from Arizona, Trisha Cortez from Laredo, Texas, Elaine Cooper from Columbia, South Carolina, Judith Freeman from Arizona. We have a ton of people coming in. It looks amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And as we're building towards this call, I want to urge you to check out the latest edition of the Revolution Report. That is our weekly newsletter that goes right into your email inbox every week. It is a great way to plug in with our most crucial work and our actions around the country. It really will help you, along with this call, it'll help you understand our inside-outside strategy and how it's working to get our policies passed. Now, the link to the latest edition of the Revolution Report is in the Zoom chat. Again, please join Zoom. If you're not in Zoom, you can always jump into the Zoom call. That's ourrev.us/Zoom. And I want to remind everyone that, we are 100% funded by you, by us, by all of us, by our members. And over the past 5 years, Our Revolution has become America's leading grassroots funded political action organization. And together with all of you, we're fighting corporate power. We're working to deliver on progressive policies. We're electing dozens or hundreds of people at all levels of government. So if you've already become a member, thank you so much. Please feel free in the chat to drop in, what you're most excited about. Are you most excited about all the people we elect at the local level? Are you most excited about the great actions that we do around issues like climate change and Medicare for all? If you're excited about the fact that we're bird dogging Kristen Sinema, whatever it is, put that in the chat. We'd love to hear about it. If you're not a member yet, it's a great time to join. It's super easy. You can just go to ourrev.us/2021 member. That's ourrev.us/2021 member. And if you're joining us by phone, just press *3. An operator can take down your information and take care of that for you. So for everyone who just tuned in, welcome. Thank you for being here. This is our special Fossil Fuels Town Hall edition of our National Organized to Win broadcast. I am Anna Callahan with Our Revolution. We are counting down just another minute or two before 8:30 when we'll start our program. We would love to hear from you in the chat. Tonight's call is going to have guest host Representative Khanna. We're going to have Keith Ellison, a panel of environmental leaders from Greenpeace, from Friends of the Earth, from Zero Hour. We're talking about a fight to end fossil fuel subsidies. If you are joining us by phone or watching this town hall live on social media, just jump over to the Zoom room. It's going to be more interactive and more fun. You can go there by going to ourrev.us/Zoom. And we love seeing all the people who are coming in. We got Margot Smith from Berkeley, California. That's where I did a lot of my Bernie organizing. Yeah, we have Alan Sattler from Our Revolution, South Carolina. Awesome. We have Clayton Tucker. They're coming in so fast, I can't even read them. So a ton of people coming in. Annie Leonard, also from Berkeley. Lots of great people here. Almost too fast for me to read. So we are about to start our call in just a minute or two. I want to give folks a second to jump in. If you haven't yet had a chance to read the Our Revolution report, you should do that. It comes out every week. It's a really great kind of take on how we do our inside-outside strategy. It keeps you up to date on all of the actions that we're doing. We are just about to start tonight's special Fossil Fuels Town Hall broadcast. First, let me do a couple of housekeeping items. So if you have a question for our guests and you're on the phone, you can press *3. An operator is going to take your question down, and that'll get them right to us. If you're in the Zoom room, you can put your questions right in the Q&A section. We want everyone to be able to participate in our virtual community here, so please do hop into the Zoom call if you're on the phones or if you're watching live on social media. And you can do that by visiting ourrev.us/Zoom. That's ourrev.us/Zoom. And with that, we are going to go ahead and get started. Let me bring in Our Revolution Executive Director, Joseph Gevargis. He is going to open up tonight's Fossil Fuels Town Hall.
Thank you so much, Anna Callahan. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our special town hall on exposing big oil's lies to the American people. My name is Joseph Gevargis, and I'm the Executive Director of Our Revolution. In a moment, I'll be handing over the virtual microphone to tonight's special guest host, United States Representative Ro Khanna, Chair of the House Oversight and Environmental Subcommittee. This Thursday, Ro is going to be putting big oil CEOs from Exxon, BP, and Chevron in the hot seat to testify about their decades-long track record of lying to the American people. Tonight, we're going to preview this upcoming hearing with Ro and a panel of environmental leaders from Greenpeace, Zero Hour, and Friends of the Earth. Ro's also going to drill down on the details of a lawsuit that state attorneys generals are bringing against the fossil fuel industry with Our Revolution board member and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. But first, I want to talk about the organizing, the amazing grassroots organizing that we have done together to build momentum to get to this moment. Over the course of the past year, our movement has been organizing to turn off the spigot of taxpayer money that's pouring into big oil's pockets through an inside-outside strategy. On the outside, we're engaging in collective citizen action on the streets. And on the inside, we're working with our congressional allies to hold big oil accountable. This past spring, leading up to Earth Day, we kicked off our campaign against fossil fuel subsidies with a series of people-powered virtual rallies. Ro was able to build on our outside momentum, and he called a special hearing where he grilled a fossil fuel lobbyist and got him to admit that fossil fuel companies have been getting special preferential treatment under the U.S. tax code. Brothers and sisters, Ro exposed that lie. And together, we're going to continue exposing the lies of big oil, just like we did with big tobacco years ago. From there, we kept on ramping up our action. This summer, our coalition came together for a rally on Capitol Hill with Representatives Ilhan Omar, Earl Blumenauer, and of course, our giant cash-eating, smoking dinosaur. That day, a delegation delivered a letter to Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi that was signed by hundreds of organizational representatives from around the country who are demanding that Congress use the budget bill to bring an end to taxpayer subsidies for dirty fossil fuels. And brothers and sisters, we did not just organize in DC. We organized around the country. Over the summer, we held revolution recess actions targeting key congressional Democrats to make sure our priorities got into and stayed in the budget bill. Our Revolution Texas put the pressure on Petro-Dems like Henry Cuellar, who have been begging Nancy Pelosi to keep taxpayer dollars flowing to their oil baron buddies. Our Revolution Massachusetts rallied repeatedly outside the offices of the powerful chair of the Ways and Means Committee, Representative Richie Neal, and our Revolution New Jersey Bird Dog Ways and Means Committee member, Representative Bill Pascrell, up and down the Garden State. And over on the West Coast, our Revolution Oregon rallied outside the office of Ron Wyden, the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, with a clear message: hold the line, Senator. Brothers and sisters, we fought hard to create this organizing moment. Months and months of grassroots organizing on the outside and putting pressure on the inside. We now have a moment, a chance to end fossil fuel subsidies and hold industry executives accountable because of your support. I want to take a moment and thank all of our Revolution members who have been with us every step of the way as we battle against big oil. For those of you who aren't yet a member of our revolution, I urge you to join the fight right now and help us make a difference. If everyone who's listening gives $1, $2, $5 a month, we can build a powerful grassroots army to take on the corporate giants that oppose us. Brothers and sisters, become a movement builder today by signing up in the link in the chat. It's ourrev.us/2021 member. Again, ourrev.us/2021 member. And if you are one of the thousands of people who are not in the Zoom room but are joining us by phone, please press *3 and an operator will take down your information. Again, become a movement builder and help us realize transformational change all across the country. Now, let's start to talk about tonight's program. Action on the climate has been blocked for decades by the dirty lies of big oil and their slick maneuvers behind the scenes in Washington, D.C. to block progress. We know that the industry has unlimited resources. Many of those resources come from us, our taxpayer dollars, and they use our resources to poison the public discourse and to make sure that we, the people, don't have the truth. But now, as the president heads to Glasgow for climate talks, we are joining together to send the global community a signal that we will not allow our climate policy to be dictated by a coal profiteer, Joe Manchin, and the big oil machine that is working overtime to water down the climate measures in the budget bill. That's why we're starting the next phase of our strategic campaign. We're going to start to dispel the climate disinformation that's been put out by big oil. And by doing so, we're going to clear a path for climate justice. Brothers and sisters, we are out of time. We face an existential climate, and we cannot allow big oil to continue to poison our discourse, poison our politics, and poison our planet. Tonight, we're going to be joined by United States Representative Khanna, who's having hearings in the House. We're also going to be joined by a panel of amazing environmental leaders who are going to be talking about the campaign that the fossil fuel industry has been waging to keep the spigots flowing. With that, I want to introduce our special guest host for the evening, United States Representative Khanna, who is chair of the House Oversight Subcommittee on the Environment. This Thursday, Representative Khanna is going to be calling oil executives to testify under oath before Congress. Ro, it is so good to have you tonight.
He'll be on shortly. We're having technical difficulty.
Oh, we have a technical difficulty. So Ro will be joining us shortly. So before that, let's go to our panel. So our panel includes distinguished environmental activists, and one of them is Professor Naomi Oreskes from Harvard University. Professor, tell us a little bit about some of the research that you've been doing into climate disinformation and what you've discovered as a result.
I have to unmute. Joseph, thank you for that terrific
Welcome,
introduction.
Professor.
Yeah, and thank you for rallying all of us to this absolutely critical cause. So as many of you know, I've been working for about 20 years now, studying the history of disinformation, largely funded by the fossil fuel industry and their ideological allies. Through my work and the work of my colleagues, plus also investigative journalists like the terrific journalists at the Los Angeles Times and Inside Climate News, we have documented beyond any reasonable doubt that the fossil fuel industry, going back to the earliest days of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, before some of you out there were even born, was consciously, deliberately, and very professionally seeking to sabotage climate action, and to do that with disinformation, doubt-mongering, denial, and misdirection. We know that they funded phony reports to try to make it seem as if the science was less settled than it really was. We know that they undertook extensive advertising campaigns to persuade the American people that we didn't really know if climate change was a problem. They cherry-picked scientific data. They attacked scientists, they attacked me, they misrepresented my work and the work of climate scientists, misrepresented the work of the IPCC, and then used these misrepresentations to support extensive lobbying efforts on Capitol Hill to prevent our senators and congresspeople from having good information and making good decisions, but instead working to support the interests of the fossil fuel industry. They also worked extensively with what they called third-party allies, right-wing, reactionary, and libertarian think tanks to promote this message of disinformation. We know they coordinated to keep their message consistent. We often saw the same language used by many different organizations. And the net result of all of this was to poison the well of public debate and to deny us, the American people, the right to good information about our lives, good information that would enable us to make good decisions about our country, our lives, our families, and our planet.
So question, Professor, is the disinformation continuing? Is this campaign ongoing, or has it ceased given all of the attention that's being paid to the climate crisis right now?
Well, I think there's two things people have to know when this question comes up. The first is, who's got the burden of proof? If we knew that a man had been abusing his wife, beating his domestic partner for 30 years, and suddenly he said, oh, but I stopped, would you trust that, or would you ask him to prove it? So the fossil fuel industry, particularly ExxonMobil, has claimed that they no longer fund disinformation. But those of us who work close to this don't find that a credible claim based on their 30-year history, based on the track record, and also because they have never opened their books to an independent audit. Way back in 2006, the Royal Society of Britain, which is not exactly a radical organization, one of the most traditional, conservative, staid scientific organizations on the planet, sent ExxonMobil a cease and desist request. They had identified 39 different third-party allies, so think tanks and the like, that were promoting disinformation or misinformation about climate change that were funded by ExxonMobil. And they asked ExxonMobil to stop doing that. ExxonMobil claims that they have stopped, but they have never provided any evidence to back up that claim. So those of us who have worked on this issue for a long time, we think the answer is easy. Ask them to open their books. If they've got nothing to hide, then show us that.
Open up the books. That's a great rallying
cry.
Yeah,
open the books, exactly. Open the books. Let us see. The other thing I would say about this is that in addition to just the burden of proof question, and it seems to me the burden of proof is clearly on the fossil fuel industry, the other thing is that we have evidence that the disinformation continues. So it continues in some different ways. These people are smart, they're clever, they have professional public relations and advertising people to help them, but we still see an awful lot of misinformation or misleading claims. So we know that these companies, particularly Chevron and ExxonMobil, have spent huge amounts of money on advertising. If you watch the recent Olympics, you saw lots and lots of ads for fossil fuel companies. And these ads present these companies as if they've made really major commitments to renewable energy. You may have seen the ads that ExxonMobil runs touting their algae biofuels program. These renewable energy and sustainability initiatives are a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of their business model. Their central business model is business as usual, continuing to develop, explore, and sell the oil and gas that is driving dangerous climate change. And they have made no indication that that is changing whatsoever. So the advertising campaigns are very misleading. One recent study showed that 80% of Chevron's advertising campaigns emphasize renewable energy and sustainability, but this represents less than 2% of their total business operations. So the advertising campaigns are deeply misleading about the character of these companies. Shall I continue? We also know that they continue to fund trade organizations like the American Petroleum Institute that continues to say misleading things about climate change and misleading things about climate solutions. You had your slide up of just a minute ago. Just this year, an ExxonMobil lobbyist admitted that ExxonMobil was publicly supporting a carbon price because they knew there was no chance that it would ever pass. And how did they know? Because, of course, they're doing the lobbying to prevent it. So they will say in public that they support carbon pricing, but everything they do tells us that that isn't really true. And then the last thing I would say is their own web pages. So if you haven't already done it, I highly recommend that you regularly check in with ExxonMobil's homepage. If you go there, you will see that they tell us that they are providing energy to us safely. Well, I think anybody who's read the IPCC 1.5 degree report knows that what is going on now is not safe, that we are already being adversely affected by hurricanes and floods and fires and heat waves that have been made worse by climate change and that are killing people and that are destroying people's homes. And this is being fueled by the fossil fuels that ExxonMobil tells us are safe. So I think that's pretty incorrect, let's just say. And then here's the most recent one I've been tracking. So as you know, if you've been following what's going on in Washington, D.C., the fossil fuel industry is pushing for even more subsidies than they already have in order to support carbon capture technology. If you go to the homepage of ExxonMobil, they will tell you that carbon capture is a proven technology. That's their words. That is a gross misrepresentation of the facts. Because if you ask yourself, well, what is carbon capture proven for? Virtually all of the existing carbon capture projects in the United States are in service of oil and gas production. So for example, carbon capture for enhanced oil recovery. And if anybody doesn't know what this is, we can have another seminar next week and I can tell you all the technical details, but it means using carbon dioxide to get even more oil and gas out of the ground. So this is not a climate solution. This is a climate exacerbation. This will make the climate problem worse. So what we know is that carbon capture is a proven technology to make the fossil fuel problem even worse than it already is. Now, if you want to talk about carbon capture as a climate solution, that would mean you'd have to do the work to prove that the carbon dioxide stays in the ground more or less forever. And no one on the planet has ever proven that they can do carbon capture and store it in the ground in that way. So this is not a proven technology when it comes to climate solutions. And to claim that it is deeply, deeply misleading.
So, Professor, thank you very much. I now want to bring up Representative Khanna. Ro, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, we were having technical difficulties on the Zoom in. I'm honored to
probably
be part
caused
of this.
by the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah, who knows? They're trying everything to disrupt it. I much rather they show up in person than Zoom. Maybe that's their grand plan. But we have had terrific help with some of the panelists, Professor and others that are very much looking forward to this hearing. I mean, it's been decades of work for people to document how the fossil fuel industry knew about climate science, knew about climate change and the climate crisis, and lied. I mean, it's that simple. They knew it and they lied about it. And as a result of their lies, we are 30 years late in starting with seriousness investments in renewable energy and tackling the climate crisis. I mean, they lied not just in a way that was to their customers or their shareholders. They lied in the New York Times. They lied to the general public. They had a strategy to shape uncertainty and doubt in science that they knew was true. It would be as if I were to be telling kids and people all across the country that there is uncertainty about whether the Earth is round, and the Earth may be flat, and we don't know if the Earth is round, and all along knowing that the Earth is round. I mean, it was that blatant. And they continue to engage in deception. They continue to engage in misrepresentation, saying that they are tackling the climate crisis and they're committed to Paris, but having very little percent of their spending on zero carbon technology, telling total falsehoods about carbon capture when there are so few carbon capture projects and very few have any sense of viability and don't actually store. There's nothing to talk about how they actually would store the carbon in the ground and prevent it from escaping, or how this was actually going to reduce emissions in any feasible way. And they continue to fund third-party groups that are engaged in climate disinformation. Now, they have not been very cooperative in producing documents, but the good news is there's so many documents in the public record. This is an investigation that's going to go on for a year, but we already have so much because of the excellent work of so many who've dedicated their lives to this cause, that they're going to have a very hard time. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're going to be trained and lawyered up and have every trick in the book, but the evidence is so incontrovertible that they're going to really have a stark choice. Do they risk coming close to the line to committing perjury and go the way of the tobacco executives, or do they do a full mea culpa and admit all of the wrongdoing and commit to change? I've studied this very closely now for months. We've looked at every possible excuse they can make. I believe their most effective strategy would be to come and tell the truth, but we'll see what they do. But we're prepared with a lot of evidence, which is all, frankly, in the public record. And it's the first time they're going to have to answer to the American people for this. Really the first time. I mean, there have been tons of hearings, tons of information, but they've never had to answer. So some of this is going to be new ground of what are these companies really going to say about all of this disinformation. And when we address this disinformation crisis, we will start to pierce their social capital and start to change the public sentiment on this and demand change. One of the things that resonates with Democrats, independents, and Republicans is the sense that companies shouldn't lie to the American public. It actually makes them more energized to tackle climate science. They may not agree with us on all of the actions on on climate change, but they agree that companies shouldn't tell them falsehoods. And if they have told the American public falsehoods, they should be responsible for taking corrective action and making amends. And so that's our goal, to have that message come out loud and clear. And we need all of your help, not just with your ideas. Many of you have given us ideas, helped share and inform our perspective. Thank you for that. But then to help get the word out during the hearings, make this breakthrough in the American public, and then help us afterwards, because it's going to be a year-long investigation. This is just the beginning on what follow-up documents we need on how we continue this investigation. We together can make this really a historic moment, the big tobacco moment for big oil, that really is a moment that shifts public opinion about what they've done and galvanizes the country to truly tackle the climate crisis.
And Ro, today we're joined by an amazing panel of environmental leaders, as well as Professor Oreskes from Harvard. We're joined by Ebony
I know Professor
Martin
Oreskes very well. We just spoke a few days ago, and she's brilliant in Merchant of Doubt. Her book is one I've read, and she's informed a lot of her thinking.
And we're also joined by Ebony Martin from Greenpeace and Erich Pica, Friends of the Earth. And so a couple of, just want to throw the floor open. And actually, let me throw it to Ebony first. Ebony, first, congratulations on your new position as co-CEO of Greenpeace.
Thank you so much, Joe. So excited and energized to go a little bit further in this fight with you all.
That's great. And so, Ebony, tell us a little bit about what Greenpeace has been doing on the fossil fuel issue.
So we've done a number of things. As you know, it is a primary goal in our campaign, especially to end fossil fuel subsidies, and we're still in that fight. We have released reports on fossil fuel racism, specifically to combat the disinformation that the fossil fuel industry continues to spread, and specifically linking it to the impacts on Black and Brown communities, both in terms of health and in terms of what we're experiencing with the extreme weather. 100-year storms now every 5 years, flooding, fires out in the Midwest, everything that Black and Brown people are on the front lines and being most impacted. We also have filed a complaint, an Ftc complaint, against Chevron in conjunction with Global Witness and Earthworks. As we've all said, the fossil fuel industry has been spreading disinformation for years, and we have asked the FTC to look into this, specifically with their green guides, showing that Chevron has blatantly gone against those guidelines by running fancy PR campaigns, using fancy lingo, saying that they are advancing clean energy solutions, when you really look into the books, as we open the books, less than 2.2 of their expenditures, the capital expenditures, actually go into any type of clean energy solutions. So they are using fancy words, trying to activate the public interest, and want to distract from the fact that they just spilled 600 gallons into the San Francisco Bay a few weeks ago, as if the public hasn't noticed that. So we have filed this complaint. We are waiting to hear back, and we're pushing forward on that. And also, you'll see us out with our revolution. You'll see us out. We were out at Manchin's Houseboat last week. We are speaking truth to power. We are letting them know we see them. They cannot catch us off guard. And we are not relenting. We want what justice and science demands right now. And that is a phase out of fossil fuels completely.
Thanks, Ebony. And again, that's Ebony Martin with Greenpeace talking about the disparate impact that fossil fuel misinformation has on communities of color, and talking about pulling the curtain on the greenwashing that these big oil companies are doing. They're talking about investing in renewables. They're talking about carbon capture. The truth is very different. I want to bring up Erich Pica, who is president of Friends of the Earth. Welcome, Erich. Tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing on fossil fuel misinformation.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you to the Our Revolution, like all the activists on the line. I mean, it's been Our Revolution, Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, and other folks have really been pushing this fossil fuel subsidy fight. Because we've been at the front lines at the beginning of this thing, and it's just exciting. We're weeks, if not days, away from understanding what our campaigning's been doing. So just a huge thank you, Joseph, to you and the whole crew and everybody on here. I think we should understand that this is not our parents' climate misinformation or disinformation. I think Naomi was correct that there's been this huge evolution. In just the last decade, we've gone from Senator Inhofe throwing a snowball on the Senate floor and the term global cooling to something completely new. Now they talk about net zero emissions, or how actually fossil gas is a bridge fuel, or they talk about the hydrogen or carbon capture and sequestration. And so what these lies, the lies that they're delivering is really a really sophisticated story that they're telling the American public about their own justification, their own reason for being. And the goal is to delay climate progress and to protect their profits. Now, what does this do as it relates to fossil fuel subsidies? Well, one of the most persistent and harmful pieces of misinformation is subsidy related. We actually saw during Roe's showdown with the American Petroleum Institute a few months ago that the lie was the big oil industry doesn't receive subsidies. So why are you campaigning against us? We're just these big companies doing what every taxpayer business does. What every business does is we just use the tax code for normal things. And what Roe was able to do is get them to admit they get treated specially in the tax code. And in fact, they're getting treated to $121 billion in expenditures from taxpayers that it exists, right? And so that's one of the big lies they keep on telling Congress. They keep on telling the American people that we believe in the free market, where what it actually is, it is like the American taxpayer subsidizing from cradle to grave the oil and gas industry, not only with dollars, but with our lives, our lungs, our water, and our planet, right? And so that's, the impact and what we've been doing at Friends of the Earth is really trying to pull attention to all these little escape valves that the industry is trying to put into the debate, and really focus it on what we need to do. We need to cut the fossil fuel industry and the oil and gas companies in particular off of the federal dole. And we have this opportunity this week to do it, right? And so we're having this discussion about misinformation and disinformation. And the best thing we can do at this moment is call every member of Congress and say, look, you're getting a whole bunch of BS from these companies. We are here to tell you, we're going to hold you accountable electorally for not getting rid of fossil fuel subsidies. That is the antidote right now, which is what Our Revolution is awesome at, right? Is showing members of Congress that despite all the BS they're getting, that we will stand up and hold them accountable. And this is the moment we're in right now with the fossil fuel subsidies in the U.S. Congress.
And Erich, a question. I mean, we know money is fungible. Do we have any evidence that our taxpayer dollars are helping fuel climate disinformation?
Fueling, I mean, the fact that they can deduct from their taxes the very advertising that they're putting out there, right? I mean, that is like the kind of the creme de la creme of these subsidies. And that's an ordinary business expense, right? But the fact that they can deduct the fact that they're lying to the American people, they're poisoning our climate from the very taxes that they're paying to the American government, is just, I'll say kind of, expose the bullshit. I mean, that's what this is, right? And so we don't need, we know that's going on. I believe that Naomi is correct. We need to get them to open up their books and show us what they're advertising. But we also need social media companies to stop advertising to them, right? There's a wonderful campaign going on, which is to all the ad agencies, stop selling them ad space, stop selling them ad time, because of the damage that they're doing to the American public and the damage they're doing in regards to our fight to save the planet from this climate crisis.
Thanks, Eric. Now I want to bring up Khadija Khokhar, who is with 0 Hour. She's a student climate activist. Sister, tell us a little bit about what 0 Hour has been doing on this issue.
Of course. So I am not going to go into statistics. I know that Naomi, there's so many experts here who have already touched up on those. But coming from a student perspective, I'd just like to say that, first of all, as you asked, 0 Hour is pushing to end fossil fuel subsidies. We're pushing to stop Line 3. We're working to pass comprehensive climate legislation that serves all people, all communities, like Ebony mentioned, Black and Brown communities that are on the front lines and the most vulnerable. And to kind of put this entire conversation into context, basically the disinformation pushed forward by the big oil companies have led to climate inaction. And today the IPCC says there's less than 10 years until this climate crisis is irreversible. In 10 years, I'll be 20 or 30 years old. So just putting that into context, I am currently a student, so I'm investing into the future that I may or may not have at this point. And so to kind of talk about that, there's the fossil fuel industry is so invested into all aspects of my life and all of our lives around here, whether it's education, whether it's our government, whether it's climate treaties such as COP26. It's actively involved in all parts of our lives. And so it's a bigger conversation of how do we pull those out and how are we going to hold these companies accountable? And the real thing that I'm trying to bring forward is that coming from a student, coming from a young organizer, this is not a fight that we can push off. This is not a conversation that we can keep kicking the can down the road. We can't keep talking about future solutions because the future is no longer promised. So for someone who's currently organizing and trying to work for a better tomorrow, there's a real desperation and there's a real push and anger and rage with young people to hold these corporations accountable because they are directly responsible for the current corruption and destruction of our environment. So really that's kind of the conversation and the aspect that I'm trying to bring in, that these big lies and the disinformation that has been put forward has directly affected my future and future of all of us, future of the younger generation. And it is incredibly dangerous and we really need to push. So I'm really excited for this hearing and excited to see where it takes us. So yeah.
So Congressman Khanna, you were with us last Monday night before you went to meet with the president at the White House. And you told us on Monday you were going to bring up the issue of fossil fuel subsidies with the president. I know you did. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that conversation and where we stand in this moment in this fight?
Absolutely, Paco. First, let me just briefly thank you and Joseph and, of course, Larry Cohen and Annie Leonard for their leadership on this issue. And Ebony, thank you for your partnership at Greenpeace and all that you have done in this fight long before we got involved in it. Of course, I already mentioned the Professor Naomi Oreskes, whose work really is seminal and foundational, and Khadija Khokhar from 0 Hour and Erich Pica from Friends of the Earth. Thank you for your contributions as well. And just have to give a shout out to Katie Thomas, who's just been a hero in pulling all of this together at the staff level in the committee and done incredible work. I believe that the hearings are ultimately linked to the goal of getting rid of fossil fuel subsidies. I mean, we raised it with the president. We're still raising it and saying you can't get rid of the clean electricity program and just think progressives will vote for the bill if there's no alternative that will bring down emissions by 50% by 2030. And we're pushing for those alternatives, including ending fossil fuel subsidies, which is why I'm in a rush, hopefully, that this hearing happens before the final framework is settled. Because I think after you have these hearings, it's going to be very difficult to justify subsidizing companies that are blatantly misleading the American public, blatantly deceiving the American public about their commitment to to tackling the climate crisis. I mean, you literally, I don't want to give everything away in case some of the, I've had now this strange experience that the oil companies, I think, have bots following me, so they hear everything I say, and so I don't want to tip off all the question lines. But some of the information is so public. I mean, the idea that they're spending less than 0.2% on these clean technology initiatives and still spending a chunk of their budget on expanding their oil production, on expanding emissions, and then claiming that they're somehow furthering the goals of the Paris Agreement. I mean, it's just a blatant lie. And that is all going to be exposed at these hearings. And then they're going to have to, then members of Congress are going to have to really think, okay, are we really going to be using taxpayer dollars to subsidize this industry, to subsidize an industry that can't even tell the truth to the American public, that has deceived the American public and continues to deceive the American public? So these hearings are critical in building the support that all of these great environmental leaders on the panel have been fighting for, Larry and Annie and all of you have been fighting for. And Katie has been doing an amazing job in Congress, getting more people on board. It seems to me it should be a no-brainer. And then on Build Back Better, we still have a fight. I mean, this is still an ongoing negotiation, trust me. And there are two things I think central. One, I know it's a little off topic, but we need Medicare expanded to cover dental, vision, and hearing. And that was all of us heard Senator Sanders. He campaigned all over the country for that. It's actually the most popular thing in the entire bill. It's not coming out, and we're making that clear. And the second main issue is climate. The second main issue is that, and Jared Huffman was great on this with the president directly, and a number of us have raised it, that you can't have a bill and show up to Glasgow and sell climate short and just say that tax incentives are going to be enough. They're not going to be enough. We all know that they're important, and that billions and hundreds of billions of dollars of that is a good thing. But that's not enough without some form of mandates, without some form of regulations to limit emissions. And that's going to become even clearer with the hearings. I mean, you can have all the incentives, and if Exxon and Chevron and all these companies are saying we're going to expand oil production, and you don't have mandates and regulations and emissions, you're not going to hit the 50% reduction. It's just not possible. So we're still pushing very hard to get climate into the reconciliation bill, and I appreciate everyone on this call advocating for that.
Thanks, Ro. And then a question. After Thursday, and I know we don't know what the CEOs are going to say, what do you see as your next steps in this effort to hold fossil fuel companies accountable?
Is that for me, Pastor?
Yes, Congressman.
The next step, well, one, I want to be clear, this is just the beginning of the investigation. So the next step may be to have them back in. I mean, we're going to have document production requests after that. We're going to be asking these companies for some documents that people have been wanting for years. What are their own scientists telling them about climate science? What are their own scientists recommending to them? What are the actual groups that they're funding that may be engaged in climate denial? What is the oversight they have on third-party groups for seeing whether they're engaged in climate denial or hurting the climate agenda? So a lot of these questions are going to require more documentation, and we're going to continue that. We're going to issue a report as a subcommittee with recommendations. We're going to ask them to stop in engaging in some of this activity and commit to that under oath. And then we're going to look at what policy matters follow from this. I mean, obviously the end of fossil fuel subsidies, but other areas to hold them accountable to stop on the misinformation, and we'll be recommending legislative fixes. But the most important point I want to convey on the investigation is this is not a one-day thing. It's a one-year thing, and people should view Thursday as the beginning of the fight with the fossil fuel industry to really hold them accountable.
And let me open this up for Erich and Ebony, Naomi, others. What do you see as the next steps for our movement in terms of holding the industry accountable post-hearing? The hearing is probably just the beginning and builds on a lot of the work that the environmental community has done on this issue.
I can go ahead and jump in. I think we will need to make big oil the next big tobacco. Just as it's not controversial to say that tobacco causes cancer, it shouldn't be controversial to say that fossil fuels cause cancer. And we have to keep exposing and keep pulling the veil and keep pulling the curtain and keep talking and letting folks know this is why you have asthma. This is why you're dealing with respiratory issues. We have to keep demonizing the fossil fuel industry so that people see it just as big tobacco. And then when it's time to legislate and make laws, fossil fuel industry shouldn't be in the room, just like with the tobacco companies. They weren't in the room when we legislated then, and they shouldn't be in the room when we legislate for fossil fuels now. So yes, it's a long fight. But I think if we keep our eyes on the prize, just as we did with tobacco, we can do the same with fossil fuels.
Erich?
Yeah, I agree with Ebony, and I think the issue, taking the tobacco comparison one step further, is we need litigation. And so you're seeing cities and counties and states from across the country beginning to sue the fossil fuel industry and big oil. And so it's going to be that the financial liability from all the damage they've done in the last 100 years of their existence, and kind of bringing the full weight of law and liability into this debate is what's going to force them to ultimately change. And that was the tipping point with tobacco. That's been the tipping point with some of the big drug companies, is that we need these hearings and the evidence that is kind of pulled out of these hearings to help fuel some of the litigation that's going on around the country, and frankly, that's going on around the world, to finally hold this industry accountable for the damage they've caused to so many lives across the planet.
And Naomi, your thoughts? And what else needs to be done to pull the curtain back on what big oil is doing over time? I'm sorry, Professor, you're on mute.
Sorry, I do that because my dog barks. I agree with what Ebony and Erich have both said. I think one of the important things here, I don't think we really need more research. As the Congressman said, we have huge amounts of documentation going back 30 years or even 40 years on what these companies have done and the way they have misrepresented the truth, the facts, and continued to propagate dangerous practices. And this is well known to probably everyone on this phone call, but it's still not really well known to a lot of ordinary Americans who haven't, I have to admit, not everyone has read my book, And so I think we have a moment here to now really break this open and to really help the American people understand what has happened. Someone earlier said, we need to point out that we've been lied to. And this is really important because no one likes to be lied to, and no one wants to be on the losing side of a con game. And that's really what this is. So I think that we have work to do to really get that message out. And also, because in my own experience giving talks around this country, I find that many people buy the industry argument that they were just giving us a product that we wanted, that we want gas to drive our cars and oil and gas to heat our homes. And so they were just giving us something that we as consumers wanted, and they didn't do anything wrong. Well, we know that's a lie. We know they did a lot wrong. But most Americans don't really fully understand that. And I think exposing this so that people come to understand that the tobacco analogy is a correct one, that the fossil fuel industry has behaved like the tobacco industry, selling us a deadly product and lying about it.
Khadija, your thoughts on what's next and what needs to be done? Oh, I'm sorry, you're on mute as well.
Oh, my apologies. Yeah, I really think that there needs to be some strong, acknowledgement across the aisle. Not only do we need to make sure that the public knows about this, I think that's something that isn't being addressed enough, that there isn't enough emphasis on making sure that everybody is understanding the weight of this issue and the weight of this hearing. And as Representative did say, this is not just a one-day thing, it's an entire year-long thing. And it's important that we keep that way, we keep that pressure and that momentum as we move forward. So I think that in a lot of cases,
Did we just lose Khadija?
Yeah, it seems like we did.
Oh, whoops. So in terms of the battle that's before us, one thing that I'm curious about is why is the industry spending so much on advertising and false information versus investing in a different business model? It seems like they're advertising about a different business model, but not actually moving there. What's the holdup? Because look, if I was a fossil fuel CEO, I would realize my days are over, and I would, just like BP, actually change my name to Beyond Petroleum and move there aggressively. What's holding up the industry here?
If I can jump in, I think we know the answer to that. I think you have to remember, this is the most profitable industry in the history of mankind. They make huge profits, and they only do one thing. This is not a diversified conglomerate that has lots of other operations. They do one thing. They explore for, drill, produce, and refine oil and gas. And I think that they don't think that their days are numbered. I think that they think that they can continue to do what they have successfully done for 30 years, which is fight back, push back climate action, and preserve business as usual. And remember, every year that they succeed at that, they make billions of dollars in profits. So even if they keep their business model going for another 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, we're talking about trillions of dollars in profits. And then I also think that they think that they can further delay with their stories about carbon capture and make us think that somehow we actually can continue using fossil fuels because we'll just capture the carbon and store it in the ground, which is why the disinformation about carbon capture, even though it may seem wonky, is actually really, really important. I also wanted to just add one other thing that I was thinking of when everyone else was talking about what else we need to do here. I think the focus on fossil fuel subsidies is hugely important, and I'm so glad to see all of you engaged in this issue because in my experience, the vast majority of American people know nothing about this. When I give public lectures, what I find is that most Americans think that renewables are heavily subsidized and that the fossil fuel industry is not subsidized. They have a completely backward view of what's actually happening. So if we can get the message out, and as someone, I think it was Eric rightly said, you know, and I should have said this because I've written about this, right? The biggest lie of all is that these people believe in free enterprise. They don't believe in free enterprise. They believe in socialism for them, welfare, corporate welfare for them. Lots of people have numbers on this, billions of dollars in subsidies, but more important, that something like 70 to 80% of all energy subsidies go to fossil fuels. Most Americans have no idea that that's true. And I think if we can get that message out, it's an extremely powerful one.
And I want to go back to Eric. I saw your hand raised, and then kick it to Representative Khanna for some closing words.
And I'll just add, Naomi, like they're a creature that only knows one thing. And we also have to look at all the other industries they're feeling, that the petrochemical build out, all the plastics. they're threatening to build hundreds of petrochemical facilities in the United States alone. And so like they're seeing a closing potentially of the internal combustion engine, right, with EVs. But what are all those plastics? What are all the various materials that are needed to build this? And so they may see one business closing down over the course of the next 30 years, but they see plastics and petrochemical as like the place where they want to go. And so they have an incentive, and that's where they even make higher margins on some of their profits than what they're doing just selling oil and gas, right? And so like the whole system is designed, they've thought out. I've often thought that the oil industry, we're thinking in 5-year, maybe 10-year increments. If we're lucky, they're out 20 years, and they've designed their business models to take these risks in account, and they're already building out the petrochemical industry as their saving grace to keep on producing, to keep on drilling, to keep on fracking, to keep on emitting as their get out of jail free card when it comes to climate change and kind of making profits for their shareholders.
And Khadija, do you have your hand raised?
Of course, yes. I'm so sorry, my internet connection cut. But I just wanted to also address the fact of greenwashing. And I know that Naomi mentioned this very briefly in the beginning, but these industries have pushed disinformation and have marketed themselves to be eco-conscious and sustainable, and use this as almost a gimmick of capitalism to further their initiatives. And what we see is that it almost shifts the blame, and it takes the blame off of, in the eyes of the public. What it does is it takes the blame of the current environmental crisis, and it takes it off of them and puts it onto the individual and the consumer. And so we see like this vicious cycle continue, and it's incredibly dangerous. And so the biggest question we have is, how do we push forward with accountability? How do we make sure that we really see transparency moving forwards? Because again, as we mentioned, most Americans don't even know about this. Most Americans don't know that every year $37.5 billion of our taxpayer dollars are given into fossil fuel subsidies. So there are these big issues, and I think that it's important to kind of narrow them down and make them palatable and understandable, because without that transparency, how do we move forwards? So, yeah.
And with that, I want to turn the floor over to Representative Khanna to give us some inspirational words about how we march forward in this fight.
Well, I think the environmental leaders and scholars have done a terrific job in the inspiration, and their work and your work is critical in having discovered the truth and knowing what's going on. But as the professor said, knowing things and knowing the truth in a democracy is only part of the battle. What is equally important is convincing your fellow citizens about that truth and about the urgency of that truth. And that is the task before us. We have to now mobilize public opinion to understand what these oil and gas companies have really been about. My wife and I were at the Ford Theater last week, and there was a wonderful play about Marian Anderson's friendship with Albert Einstein. We were excited about it, and one of the first plays that was opening up. And the first thing that they said was the play proudly sponsored by Chevron. And I thought to myself, these companies still have a lot of social capital. They still are immersed in so many parts of American life, unlike big tobacco. We have to pierce that bubble. We have to get people to understand what these companies have been about, not just profit maximization, but distortions and lies. And that exposure is really what Thursday is about. I'm confident with all of your help, we can begin to change public opinion dramatically, because the evidence is there. We have now the mobilized army, and I'm confident that we're going to do it in the course of this investigation with all of your help and activism. So thank you for participating in this conversation, and thank you to everyone listening for participating in this movement.
And with that, I want to urge everyone who joined us tonight to get involved, to take action. And we need to make sure that members of Congress understand that our taxpayer dollars can no longer go to these companies that lie and distort their track record to the American people. We have a shot right now in the budget bill to turn off the spigot, but we need to make sure our voices are heard. And look, at the end of the day, Roe is just one person on Capitol Hill. Roe needs our help. Just like we need to partner with environmental groups, we need to partner with attorneys generals to create a broad movement that is powerful enough to take on the fossil fuel industry. It is a David versus Goliath fight. But what I know is this: when we stand together, we have an opportunity to slay giants. So again, for everyone listening, I want to thank you for joining. I want to urge you to take action, sign the petition in the chat, ourrevolution.us/end subsidies, and let's make sure that this budget bill begins to crack down on financing this dirty industry. And with that, I want to bring this call to the end, and we at Our Revolution always end with a simple chat. When we organize,
we
win.
When we organize,
we win.
When we organize,
we
win.
So the fossil fuel companies can hear you. When we organize,
we win.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.